The Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad, but a network organized by groups of people ranging from black and white, old and young, men and women, freed and enslaved, participated in this fight because they believed slavery was wrong. These groups of people provided shelter, food, directions, and escorted them to a safe route, enabling them to continue on their escape to freedom. People who were helping the slaves were called conductors. The safe places along the way were the stations, and the slaves were the passengers. It's all like a train where they're all traveling from one destination to the next. And the engineers at the front are like the leaders who are leading the group of people as they hide the slaves from bounty hunters, because those people are mean. If a slave were to be caught while they were trying to escape, then their punishment would be very severe, as they would be sold to another owner, and their goals of going to the north and being free would be very far away. There were four main people who were involved in the Underground Railroad: Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Levi Coffin, and John Fairfield. Harriet Tubman was the most important figure involved. She was a slave who escaped in 1849 and made 19 trips back to the southern plantations to save the slaves. She was known as Moses, as she guided the fugitive slaves along the Underground Railroad. Frederick Douglass was an ex-slave who escaped to the north as a young man. He was an activist, a leader who helped the slaves feel like they were equal to everyone else. John Fairfield. He was an abolitionist and the conductor of the Underground Railroad. Even though he was born in a family that raised slaves, he did not like that, and that's why he helped the slaves be free, by posing as a slaveholder and a trader in order to help them escape.
The Underground Railroad revolutionized the mindset of many slaves because it aided in their success to self-emancipation from the abomination known as slavery. The main purpose of the Underground Railroad was to expose the harsh reality of slavery, to give whites an opportunity to show sympathy, and to provide a safe passage for fugitive slaves to make their way towards freedom. The experience of slavery for men, women, and children was equally terrible. Enslaved men and women were constantly beaten, separated from their families, and treated like property in the eyes of the law. Both men and women were forced to complete large amounts of work on the plantations, subjected to mental and physical belittlement, and ultimately denied basic human rights. During this time period, the abolitionist movement was on the rise. Many abolitionists, including Jonathan Walker and Levi Coffin, were influential conductors of the Underground Railroad. Jonathan Walker was a dedicated abolitionist who became a national hero in 1844 when he attempted to aid 7 slaves in their journey to freedom. Unfortunately, he was unsuccessful and was sentenced to 1 hour of pillory, time in prison, a $600 fine, and the branding of SS on his hand, which stood for slave stealer. From then on, he was known as the man with the branded hand. Levi Coffin was a Quaker from North Carolina who opposed slavery and became very active with the Underground Railroad. He worked to provide transportation, shelter, food, and clothing for thousands of escaped slaves. His home was often referred to as the Grand Central Station because it was a safe haven for fugitive slaves. Because of his dedication to help slaves, he was often called the President of the Underground Railroad. As slaves made their way through the Underground Railroad, they would stop at safe houses in order to eat, rest, and change their clothes. Escapees would often look for lit-up candles in order to identify safe houses because they symbolized the North Star, which guided slaves on the path to freedom. Although the journey involving the Underground Railroad was extremely dangerous, thousands of slaves took the risk in hope of achieving freedom.
By the 1850s, 100,000 slaves had escaped their masters by using the Underground Railroad, and these escapees used a variety of methods to obtain their freedom. Some of the more common methods used to escape enslavement include wearing clever disguises, creating songs which discreetly illustrated escape routes, getting tips from conductors in order to evade hunters and catchers, and having a general understanding of the local landscape and geography. Along with these methods, personal ingenuity and perseverance gave the slaves what they needed to survive these times of extreme racial inequality. Several songs which the slaves sang contained directions and coded routes, such as the song Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Go Down Moses, and Follow the Drinking Gourd. The song Follow the Drinking Gourd is the most obvious instance of hiding directions to an escape route in a song, as it says to go north towards the Big Dipper constellation, or, as it was called in the song, the Drinking Gourd. The song's full lyrics are, "The riverbank makes a good road, the dead tree shows you the way, left foot, peg foot, traveling on, follow the drinking gourd. When the sun comes back and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is waiting to carry you to freedom, if you follow the drinking gourd." One of the more creative ways of escaping was invented by a man with the name of Henry Brown. Brown had his white friend ship him off to Philadelphia from Richmond in a box which was 3 feet deep, 2 feet wide, and 3 feet long. Brown would remain in this box for a total of 26 hours, and when he emerged from his box, he was in the anti-slavery office in Philadelphia. Brown's idea caught on and inspired several other people to do the same. During this time period, African Americans and whites were not seen as equal by society, and many African Americans were enslaved. Through the use of the Underground Railroad and many other civil rights movements, slavery would eventually be abolished, although African Americans would still be unequal in the eyes of society.